everyone, thank you very much for joining me again on the Rosse Bespoke YouTube channel. Now today we're answering a very important question, and that is the question about work-life balance. If you like listening to mentors who tell you how to become billionaires, they will usually tell you there's no such thing as work-life balance. You should only work, work, work and ignore your life. But I'm hoping there's a bit more to life than ignoring your life. So we've got a really good panel together today to talk about that. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
I can start. So I'm Chloe. I live over in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. I moved over almost 11 years ago. I was brought over by a high net worth individual who was looking for a private PA. I worked with him on and off for just over 9 years in the end. And the role kind of grew and developed as per his kind of private life did. So he got married, he had a child, expanded houses and residences and other things, had bigger events, had then kind of different events, anything from his kind of wedding celebration up to then birthday parties towards the end with the child. So I ended up kind of leaving as his private office manager. I met my husband while I was over here, and we fell pregnant at the end of 2018, and I left my role while I was on maternity leave because I wasn't convinced that I would have a good enough work-life balance and be able to spend enough time with my son. So we took that decision that I would step aside for the time being and become a stay-at-home mum.
And Chloe, would you mind just telling people what it is you do now? Because I think something that's very interesting is your business that you now run is specifically designed for your lifestyle.
Yeah, so obviously in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates, you get quite a lot less than Europe's probably used to in terms of maternity leave. So the statutory leave is around 50 days now, I think. And I just wanted a lot longer at home. So I was gearing up to get ready to go back to work when COVID hit. And then we were in lockdown for quite a while. I think it's something that was obviously impacted everybody. So trying to find kind of a more corporate role that I could go back into or something that kind of played to strengths from a PA private office point of view just wasn't possible last year in Dubai. And I kind of fell into, by chance, just advising a contact of mine on sort of improving her operations and HR of her startup. And a friend of mine who was also used to be in private service was doing something similar for a completely different company. She was approached to do it for someone else, didn't have the capacity, but knew that I was doing the same. And we kind of banded together and we created a partnership just over 4 months ago now, that's geared primarily at helping mums in business. So mums that have had an amazing idea, have set it up, very creative or very into kind of the product or service side of what they do, and just trying to kind of launch themselves from that home office or running a small company into expanding and growing, don't necessarily have the experience of putting a back end in place that will help them do that. So we go in and we advise like these either mums at home or a small company that's already up and running about how they can best upscale and what kind of processes, procedures and systems they need to put in place, and then help them do that to reach kind of the next step of their business. But it's very much geared around the fact that both my partner and I have toddlers they're in childcare, but not the whole entire day. So we both don't have a kind of 9 to 6 free time to sit down and work. So we kind of work it around their childcare, and then evenings, weekends, whenever we kind of can, and husbands and fathers step in. But yeah, we're very much geared up that, you know, we're not on call constantly, and the mums that we work for, we have that understanding between us that we're mums as well, and we can't always be on call, and we're sometimes like elbow deep in bath time and things like that. So it works quite well in that respect.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think everyone can see why I just asked Chloe to point that out, to sort of look at that standpoint. So, Rachel, can you please tell us a bit about yourself?
Right. Hi, everybody. My name's Rachel Stallard. I've been in this industry, I've been saying for 25 years, but actually I've been saying that for quite a while. I think it's a little bit more. I had my daughter by surprise. I was told I couldn't get pregnant. My husband and I moved to Norway. I took a job there as a house manager, and quite quickly, after a year or so, discovered I was pregnant. I'm not sure who was more surprised, my boss, my husband, or I. But needless to say, that's what happened. My boss was quite good about it at the time. His girlfriend, a little less so. We just worked things out. You know, we worked things out, how it would work, how I would go back to work. I stopped working 2 weeks before my due date. She arrived 3 days later. So I was actually in the hospital in Oslo giving birth when they were doing the tour of pain medication and what would happen that I was meant to be on. I remember sitting on the bed, pushing this baby out and seeing the group of girls that was my sort of prenatal group go past and say, "What are you doing in here?" Yes, so she came 11 days early, and I was at home with her. I went back to work 6 weeks later. We later discovered that under Norwegian law, I should have had a year off, but that was a whole other story. And we decided we would move. We went to Spain where we had a holiday home. We went there to live. And after a couple of months, I went back to work part-time for a lady that had 6 children. And part of the job was hiring her nannies. So we just put my daughter into the cohort with her children. And it became, I want to say like a commune, but that sounds very hippie. It was very more formal than that. But it meant that I was able to raise my daughter, my boss's children with the nannies and work. And we've just made it always work somehow. She's now 20. She'll be 21 this year, which is quite scary. Has her own jobs, just finished uni, just moved out to her own flat. And here I am still working.
Love it.
It's different. It can work. It's not easy, but it can from my point of view.
That's fantastic. Right, now next on my list is Julius. Let's hear from Julius.
Well, first of all, hello to everybody, and I apologise earlier having a few technical problems with the sound. So my name's Julius Smith, and I've been in private service for 30 years. In fact, this is my 31st year. And I actually came to sort of having a private life quite late in life. So I didn't get married till I was 39. And I actually married a lady who had 2 children already. And we moved out to the Middle East. And as the first person said, I do apologize, I forgot the name of the first lady.
Chloe.
I do apologize, Chloe, sorry. As I said, in the Middle East, sort of, you know, the laws are a little bit sort of different. And essentially, I was sort of working all the hours. Essentially, I was working sort of 90 hours a week. So I spent very, very little time with the children and my wife. In fact, I never saw them. I went to any sort of school events whatsoever, or parent teachers evenings, or anything like that, because I was always working. But I think the secret is, from my side, is that I married somebody who understood what it was working in service, so they never complained. And as you know yourself, Chloe, that everything is sort of much later in the evening, isn't it? And so sometimes I wasn't finishing till sort of 2 o'clock in the evening sometimes. And you tell that to people in England, you know, and the wives saying, "Oh my God, how can your husband not come home till 2 o'clock in the morning?" But it really helped that she understood that that's how it was, and never once gave me any pressure about that, and neither did the children. Unfortunately, now I'm in a different situation where I'm sort of kind of doing my own thing, but the children have now grown up. So, but I'm spending more time with my wife, which is obviously an added benefit. So I think it is difficult, but the problem is that this is what the employers expect often, that they sort of feel like, you know, that they do own you. And in fact, the employer I was working for when I got married, she said, you know, now you're getting married, you'll care more about your wife than you do me. So, you know, and you know, when they say this type of thing, it is the beginning of the end. And but you know, you move on, and hopefully, as we all a little bit older and wiser, and we have more experience, I think we can choose our employers a little bit better, where then, you know, they maybe don't expect so much of us.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Julius. Now, Philippa, we're speaking about choosing our employers. So a nice segue into yourself.
Yeah, so I have a slightly different angle on this because I've been involved in the private sector for years, but I'm a recruiter. So I own and run a recruitment agency called Silver Swan Recruitment. We also host a podcast called, well, it's now called Life in Private Staffing. So I've never actually worked in a private environment. I have done the hospitality side back in the ski industry, and then I set up this, but I've interviewed thousands and thousands of candidates who do work in the private sector. And I've had this challenge myself, being a business owner and not knowing whether I'm able to have a family whilst running my company without that being affected, etc. So I sort of see it from, I've had this challenge myself, but I've also spoke to lots and lots of candidates that have had this challenge in the private sector as well. So I've got sort of different views on it from different angles. Yeah, in terms of from candidates working in the private sector, it is a really tricky one. I think the fear of your career being affected is greater than the actual effect on your career. And I think a lot of people, myself included, were pleasantly surprised by how their career did continue once they had children. And same with my business. I put off having kids for years and years and years and years, thinking my company will obviously fold without me being there. And actually, it was when having children, same time as you, Chloe. I've got a 2-year-old and I'm pregnant now with my second. And it actually, when I fell pregnant and had children, that's when my career took off, because I learned to trust people around me. And I learned to delegate. And lo and behold, people can do my job, which I didn't think they could. And it's thanks to me finally stepping back and allowing others around me to provide support that actually allowed my career to go to the next level. So otherwise I'd still be grinding out all those interviews myself and doing it all myself. I really would. And so it was a bit of a wake-up call for me. But for people in the private sector, I've seen a lot of the people I've had on my podcast have admitted that they have made major personal sacrifices to have a successful career in this industry. And I just find that really sad. And exactly what Julia said, I think we're in the day and age now where you have the choice and you can choose life over work, and you should choose life over work. And if your work doesn't allow that, then you need to find another position that does allow that. Because if you wake up in your 50s, 60s and your life has passed you by and you have major regrets, you can't go back. So, there are families out there that support. There are families out there that will support you to have your own life and have your own family, and it's up to you to be brave enough to go sort of find those positions, really. But anyway, we can go into all this further into the discussion. Yeah. But yeah, I've got lots of views on it.
But no, I mean, that's brilliant, and I think you're right. It's like the thing that set the tone for me when I was in private service, and I kind of figured, like, when I have children, this could be difficult, was when I actually had to come back early from my honeymoon because the boss needed me to do something for him. So, certainly, even if it didn't as much set the tone for me, it certainly set the tone for my wife as the clock on that particular career. But let's not talk about me. So this wonderful lady who's Michelle Nguyen, and I contacted her to make sure that I could correctly pronounce her second name. And bless her, she's lovely. She even gave me the phonetic pronunciation for Michelle, which is wonderful. So thank you for that. Michelle Nguyen, and she's from Hawaii, lucky her. And first, she sent me 4 questions. So the first question is, as white glove professionals, we dedicate ourselves to providing the best service to those that we support. We spend much of our time making sure all of the details in their lives are taken care of. And if there's free time, how do we practice self-care for ourselves? So I'm just going to throw that out to anyone who wants to jump in.
Silence.
Not all at once. Please, everyone's bombarding me.
I think it depends on a lot of factors. Your age, your relationship with your partner. I was lucky that my husband started this venture with me together. Our first role we did together as a couple. After a couple of years, he decided it wasn't for him, but he had that good understanding of it. So like Julius, I had a partner that was very, I don't want to say sympathetic, but was very understanding of the hours and the involvement. If you have that, it's a big head start to being able to have your work-life balance and look after yourself, because you don't feel guilty all the time. I know other people that feel guilty all the time because their partners don't understand the level of commitment and the hours and the dedication that some of us have. And if they don't understand that and you don't have their understanding and support, I think it's an impossible pathway to carry on for long.
And I don't know about any other people, but when I'm not working, I like to associate myself with people who have nothing to do with this industry. You know, when the pubs are open, go and have a beer, and they're in something completely different. And so you don't end up talking about work all the time. You end up talking about whatever, politics or whatever it may be. And I think so you've got to be, when you leave the work, you've got to be able to sort of leave that behind. Although in our industry, you've always got to have the phone with you, because you just never know what problems are around the corner. But I think, just being able to sort of just switch off.
Now I know why you've never invited me for a pint, Julius, because you only like to have pints with people out of the industry. So.
Well, you've been Scottish, you wouldn't buy another one. You wouldn't.
Or you can never come north of the border again.
But just to add to that, yeah, like the question, how do we practice self-care for ourselves? I think the danger people end up in is they have a period of time where they dedicate themselves to work only, and they don't really have much else going on outside of work in terms of passions and hobbies. And so when they do find themselves with more time, they find themselves without a huge amount to do. So I think that it takes a bit of work, actually, a bit of like conscious effort to have a life outside of work and have things to do and have things that you can prioritize and things that you're passionate about, because if you don't, you end up just working. And if I haven't got much plan on a Saturday, I will end up on my laptop doing emails. But if I make plans outside of lockdown and book stuff in, then I don't even think about work. So I do think it does take a bit of a conscious effort when you clock off from work to make sure your brain is otherwise engaged and find other stuff to do. And exactly what Julia said, stuff that's nothing to do with the industry. And you can find new passions and stuff later in life. And I do appreciate that when you haven't had much time for a period, when you haven't had much free time for a period of time, it all sort of like fades away. But you have to re-find what you're passionate about other than work. And there are always going to be passions. So find them and nurture them, I would say. And then you will look forward to your time off because you know you've got stuff booked in. You've then got the frustration, obviously, of the sector where when you need to be flexible and then you get super disappointed because the plans you've made have fallen through. But that's another thing. I think if you, work hard to have those things to do outside of work that aren't work related, I think.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think you're spot on. Can you take time for self-care? Well, yes, if you take the time for it. It's as simple as that. And you have something that you actually want to do. So I'm going to move on to question number 2 now. So I am a young woman turning 30 in March. If anyone tunes in at that point, it's going to really confuse them, isn't it? So this is in her words. I'm a young woman turning 30 in March. Everyone in my professional life asks, if I find a nice person to date, when am I going to get married and have children? It isn't enough to have a career, and I'm terrified to think about the family side, as it seems so hard to have a career and a family. How does one even think about doing both?
So I touched on this earlier, and I'll quickly do this and then let someone else speak, so I don't talk too much. But you can have both, but you need to surround yourself with people that you trust. And it's when you don't trust people around you that this doesn't work. So if you don't trust the people you work with to cover your responsibilities when you're not there, then you will not be able to not be there. And actually, it's a good sign of a manager that you can not be there and things not crumble. And if you're a manager in the private sector and the place needs you, then you're not actually managing that effectively. You need to get yourself in a position where the place runs without you. Same as a mum, I'm exactly the same as this lady. It isn't enough, like, for the career. I definitely wanted both. And actually, I'm a better mum because I have my career, and I'm better at work because I'm a mum. And the balance there is really important. But I also need to have people at home who I trust and who can support me. And again, that does take strength, because I know there are mums out there that are really not comfortable leaving their children at all with other people. But if you're not able to do that, and you can't have both, so you just need to be in a position where you have an environment at home with people that you trust, where you can leave your child. And it's good for the child to be left, I think, to go to work, but it's also really important to have people around you at work that you can trust, so when you come home, then you can have the balance. And yeah, as I say, it does take strength. Then you can nurture both your babies. Silver Swan's my baby's my baby, both very important to me. But yeah, you need to learn to trust other people to support you when you're not there.
I think I agree with what you're saying, Philippa, but personally for me, I was in a management position. I had a team, but my principal expected to still speak to me. He didn't want to speak to a team of people. He didn't want to try and figure out who was doing what. He wanted that one point of contact, and that was always me. So to try and kind of switch off and hand it over to someone else was very difficult. And for me, the decision to leave in the end, because it was a job that I loved and that I was in for years, and if I hadn't have started a family, I probably would still be there now, that the decision came down to the risk of whether I would look back and regret being still on call like that, and, you know, having to then sacrifice kind of time with my son and time with the baby to do the work. And just weighing that up with my husband, we just decided the risk was too great to not step away and have that time with him. I always kind of knew in my gut that I wouldn't regret having the time with my son, but I might regret not having it.
Yeah.
I would have done the exact same thing as you. I would have done everything in my power before I had the baby and left to get my principal to be happy to talk to somebody else other than me. So I wouldn't have just given it straight away. But if it was clear that he was not going to go, or she was not going to go to somebody else, and it was always going to come for you, I would definitely put the family first, and I would have done what you've done. There were going to be a million other jobs like and you found for yourself now. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's so easy to get caught in a position where you feel you can't leave, and then you do have regrets. A job's just a job at the end of the day. Like, we forget this. It is just a job. And as Simeon mentioned at the beginning, you know, mentors say work, work, work. I completely disagree with that. I've got a really successful career, and I've got such a healthy work-life balance. Since having kids, I didn't before I had children. I had a really unhealthy work-life balance. No, not at all. It is just a job. And if I had a member of staff that said to me, I don't feel that I can work and have children, I'd encourage them to leave. You need to be putting your life first. That you can work anytime, anywhere afterwards, but especially as a woman, we've only got a short window. Do you know what I mean? To get this done, we can work forever.
I think it goes to show what both you ladies have said, that it is very much about having the right employer. I had a bad employer who did not like the fact I was pregnant, and it was difficult towards the end. And then when we moved to Spain, had a great employer who said, we'll just make it work because I want you. And as she was a single mum, she understood it even more than me, of what it was like to juggle the work-life balance. And so maybe I landed on my feet with her. She was a lucky find. And so it's very much about the right person. There's going to be employers that hate it when you tell them they're pregnant and you're pregnant and it's a disaster, and all they see is, well, that's it, you've got to go, and they're reaching for the recruitment phone, you know. And then there's going to be others that think, well, you know what, we get on really well, you've been with me a long time, we have a good working relationship, let's see how that works. And it's going to be different in every situation. I think I've been quite lucky in some of my roles, and in some of them I've just been damn determined to make it work. But it's a lot about in the right job. And like you say, Philippa, when you suddenly find yourself pregnant, I was terrified. I thought, well, that's it, I'm not going to work till she's 40 and married, you know, I'm never going to have a job again. And it's not true. It can be done. And I don't think I've sacrificed time with her. I've not missed a school play, a bicycle lesson. I did miss one show jumping lesson, but that was a disaster. That was an emergency. I missed a competition where she came running in with the little silver cup, and she'd got first place with her first pony riding. And it's the only thing I've missed. I've been at nativity plays. Anything that's important, I've been there.
Amazing, Rachel. I don't want to come across as though I didn't have a supportive employer. I'd been with him and his wife for years and years, and they were so excited for me that, you know, I'd fallen pregnant and that I was going to have a family of my own. It was just, unfortunately, the nature of the role and what they needed, that they needed someone who could travel at the drop of the hat, and that was the biggest kind of hurdle that we just weren't able to overcome, despite kind of talking it through and being open and honest with each other. It just, they needed that, and they didn't, again, going back to kind of the main point of contact, they didn't want me to be doing some of it and then someone else to be doing the travel side. And it just, their kind of requirements, unfortunately, just didn't really suit.
That's a shame. That's really hard.
They just couldn't guarantee that I wasn't going to be asked to travel, and I didn't want to be in a position where I had a kind of 2-month-old baby and was suddenly off for weeks at a time. It just really,
but their honesty with you there was really kind, because they could have, that's where I think a lot of people probably get worried, is the employer will say one thing, oh yeah, take your 6 months off, well, you know, it'd be great when you come back, and then you sort of do that, and then I can imagine a lot of people go back, and then the employer isn't, like, the role doesn't adapt for them, and then it does become quite challenging. So I think the fact that your employer was really open and honest and just say, this is what I'm going to need from you, it gave you everything you needed to know and to make your decision, and you made your decision, and quite right, the right decision as well, I believe. So it was nice that they were brutally honest about what they were going to need from you long term before you, do you know what I mean, came back after maternity and then struggled.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, something that I'd say on this, it's, if you're someone who's been in the industry a long time and you've got a lot of experience and you're bringing all that to an employer, it's a lot easier for someone in that situation to set ground rules. You know, I do this, I'm bringing this to the table, and I'm going to set some ground rules with you as the employer. You know, I get this time off, I get this time to myself, you know, because you feel confident that you're bringing so much to the table. You have a lot of confidence in bringing those. But I know from, you know, when you're younger, when you're in your 20s and you're just so grateful to get a job, you don't think of putting any ground rules. They're like, they say things to you like, you know, classic interview questions like, what are your weaknesses? Oh, my weakness is I want to work hundreds of hours a week, and I have too much of an eye for detail, and that's what people put. And it's like, they set themselves up for a fall, because they've already said, oh no, I have no weaknesses, I work all the time. And the employer expects that because you've told them that.
A stupid question to ask an interview anyway. Sorry.
but so many do.
Yeah, exactly. It's such a bad question, but yeah.
But Simeon, just as a thought, and maybe Philippa can answer this question. Now with the whole pandemic and with so many people being made redundant, do you not think there's a danger now that a lot of employers will now expect people to literally work round the clock, and the new recruits coming on board will be so frightened about losing their jobs because there's probably going to be somebody behind them willing to do that? Whereas
only short term, like by the end of the year, I think the market will have sort of stabilised a bit. I don't know. I think it might go the other way. I think employers, in light of the pandemic, maybe a bit more relaxed about how their home can rerun with different number of people there. I don't know, I'm a much more relaxed employer now with my team. Like it's not quite so applicable because obviously we're in an office, but I think people over the course of the pandemic, where people have had to work remotely or they've had less people in the house at any one time and all the rest, I think employers have had to learn to put a lot of trust in their staff more than before, and they've probably seen that there are different ways things can be done. And I would like to think that people have mellowed and relaxed a little bit from an employer point of view in the light of the pandemic, and seen that, you know, things aren't going to fall apart if everybody's not there all the time. And, you know, that we've had to have a bit more of a controlled environment. And yet if the service has maintained, even with that, then there may be more allowances than before. Having said that, if households have gone tits up, excuse my French, and by having a more controlled environment, things have gone pear-shaped and they're craving for the structure and the formalities back, then maybe not. But yeah, you're right. You know, the candidate market is completely saturated at the moment. But having said that, even though there's loads of people looking for work, it's still a ball ache for an employer to replace people. So even though they do have their pick and they could change, do they want to? Probably not. Like staff turnover, I don't know if employers realise this, but staff look at your turnover and they look at how often your role's being advertised, and it's really unattractive for an employer to have a high staff turnover. So they need to be conscious of that and not just keep getting people lined in. Otherwise, it's just going to end up with a poor quality of people coming through the door.
And also, do you think there's a possibility when things do get back to normal that a lot more roles, possibly like the one that Chloe was mentioning, where she was asked to be traveling, where they'll become sort of that they may put two people in that role, sort of almost like the yachting side, where there'll be a sort of rotational sort of
100%. Yeah, I think the way the staffing structure in households will be after the pandemic, I think will be different to before. I think they'll become more hybrid roles, more all-rounded roles or encompassing roles. I think households will have seen a different way the house can be run because they were forced to for a period of time as well. So I think there'd be different types of roles or different duties within roles that we'll see. I think it'd be quite interesting to see the shifts that will happen in that for sure. Be interesting.
I think we're already seeing some roles getting lumped together. We're already seeing house manager and PA roles getting combined more. And I think you're right, that'll happen with more and more roles. And it won't be long before we get to that kind of shift pattern where it's one on duty, one off duty across the board with all levels of staffing. And it will make life a lot easier for people like us to have our private life, to have our childcare moments, to have parts of the job where we say, I can't travel overseas at the moment. You know, I think it would become a lot more practical. And a lot of employers have seen the bonuses of having a lot more flexibility through the lockdown. And let's just hope that carries on. The ones that have taken advantage, and there have been some that have taken advantage and dropped salaries because they know there's thousands of candidates, they are few, and hopefully that's not going to last, and we'll get to the better side of it and come out, you know, stronger with more options.
It's just on that's so short-sighted. The few employers out there that we've had the same situation in our agency. They'll be like pre or early in the pandemic, the recruitment process started, and offers being made 6 months later, way under what was originally discussed. So short-sighted, because the candidate will just be headhunted and will just leave soon after. Like, it's just such a waste of everybody's time. Do what you say you're going to do, deliver what you promised at the beginning, pay what people are worth, not what you think you can get them for, because you will just lose out and you'll be replacing people soon.
I mean, I think having the multi-trained staff I think it's a great idea, and it's something I've worked in households before where we've done that, and you've had one member of staff who is like he might be driver / security, or someone else who might be butler / chef, that kind of thing. But of course, it only works if they actually still employ the same amount of people.
Yes.
So you can do it in shifts. You know, if you have someone who does the morning and someone else who does the evening, etc., that means that the principal actually gets better care, better cover, because the person's fresher and they can work harder. But of course, if you have a combined role, but you still want them to do 3 meals a day every day and drive for you and everything else, unfortunately, that means that the quality is going to go down, not up.
No.
So it depends how it's done. But again, that comes down to the ground rules with the employer. You know, you want to make sure that you have the confidence to get that good contract and hopefully stick to it.
and also you hope that the principals just aren't going to be making these decisions. You hope they're going to be leaning on their senior members of the house before they start changing staffing structure and combining roles and having shift patterns. It would be odd for a principal just to implement these things and let the quality drop. You would hope that the house manager or chief of staff would be in a position to manage that so the quality stays, whilst giving the principal sort of that flexibility. We'll see.
Maybe.
Some employers will always listen to their staff, and some sadly will not, and make the decisions themselves on a whim. And I've seen both sides of that coin. Those that consult with you and ask your advice, you get a much better outcome than those that wake up one morning with a brilliant idea. Those don't always work, but it's the nature of the game. It's their house, it's their money. they are allowed to dictate what happens, and we have to go along with it and show either why it's going to work or why it's not going to work. I just think things are going to change more after the lockdown periods, and it's not all going to be doom and gloom. I think it's going to change for the better.
Yeah, I think it's super positive. I'm well excited, honestly. I think that the market, the private sector, it was just hit so hard, and it was so sad last year. And I was talking to lots of people on the podcast about it, and there's just a different vibe now. And I think even the way I feel in this lockdown is very different. And I think some real good can come out of this pandemic. I think people are going to come out stronger. People are going to learn how to be adaptable, flexible. There's a lot more empathy for others. And I don't know, I think obviously a lot of bad's happened and careers have been, put on hold a bit, and, people have died obviously. But I think as a whole, I think people will look back in a year or two and be like, we wouldn't be here if that pandemic didn't force us to be. And I think that's really important, to be focusing on what we can take away from this now, rather than
people talk about us going back to normal. I'm not sure I want to go back to normal. I want to move forward and take what we've learned from the lockdown and have more empathy. There's so much more being talked about people's mental health these days. Nothing is being swept under the carpet. Everything's out there and everything's able to be discussed. And that is so much better. And that's a such better gateway to people being able to say, I've got a problem at work, and for us to discuss it and fix it, rather than don't say anything, don't speak to the boss, keep it a secret, try and cope with things. And I come from the era where that very much was the case. And I think me at 21, 22 now, coming into this industry now, I wouldn't be able to cope with it. So to be able to have that much more open door and things, yeah, great. Let's bring on a new normal.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you, a thought that something that I'd actually just like to share. I was saying that yes, I did move away from private service to have children, but it was by no means because the employer was unhappy or anything like that about the idea of me having children. It was actually from my point of view that I didn't think that I would have, and this could be wrongly, I was open to interpretation from anyone. This could definitely be wrong. I wasn't confident I'd be able to do the same sort of service because we're talking about old school training, this kind of thing. My training had always been that, the butler has to do 100% all the time. The client comes before anything else. And I knew that if it came down to a straight choice between the employer and my children, I knew I was obviously always going to choose the children. So for me, I thought, well, maybe I'm not the best person now to do this job. Maybe someone else would be better, under these circumstances. But you know what, with hindsight, I'm actually still very, very glad I did it, because I started this business and I started to do all this and it's worked out much better for me. But actually, I now think that, and I know the employer himself said he was happy to change the way we did. So actually, I think it would have still worked out very well if I'd continued in private service. So there are always options for people.
I mean, I don't know if you're probably too young to remember this, Simeon, but when I first started, in your contract, you'd have hours as required.
Yes.
So essentially, you had to work. You'd be there before the employer woke up in the morning, till the employer went to bed.
Yeah.
And you just it was just a way, you just got used to it, and and even going back, sort of 100 years ago, I mean, essentially the staff would have part of Sunday morning off to go to church, and that was it.
Yeah.
So we have come quite a way, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, some of my clients, one of my clients, I worked 6 days a week for one of my clients back in the day. It was a family that I looked after, but I agreed to it. I was happy to do it. It wasn't like they forced me to do it. They were one of the ones that I did their cooking for them and all that kind of stuff. And I felt very much part of the family life, because I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I actually sat down at the dinner table with them every single night. I would cook the dinner and then sit down and eat the dinner with them, because that's what they liked. It was an informal household, but everything's different.
I think having children definitely works better when you're not working in a formal household. I've done both formal and informal households, and thinking about the hours and the things I did in a formal household, it wouldn't have been as possible for me to have my child in the background. And I think there's been times in her life when it's worked better that I had informal households with families that were quite casual, that maybe had young children of their own. And although they had a bank of nannies and housekeepers to help, and I didn't, they at least had that comprehension of what it's like to have to consider having children around. And that helped. I think if I'd had her when she was a toddler and worked for people that didn't have children at all, I think that could have made it harder. And it comes back to the same thing. I think it's so much about the right employer at the time.
Yeah, and as Simi just said as well, like it's, you have the choice, and on the flip side as well. So when clients come to us looking for staff, we do get some clients that say it would suit someone that hasn't got children because we know what we expect of them, which is totally fair enough. But equally, we do also get the complete opposite, where they say this would really suit a couple who maybe have young children, there's a lovely school in the village, there's a cottage for them, because I think that would suit their family situation as well. Maybe
longevity.
Then they're probably less likely to up and root quick if their kids are in a local school and that kind of thing. So do bear in mind, there are employers out there that will prioritize candidates or applicants who have young children or who want young children, and they want those type of candidates where family is important, and family, do you know what I mean? So don't think that there aren't families out there or employers out there that will allow you to have this family. Sometimes they seek you out, you know, and you have the choice. And if having a family, if you know having a family is going to be important, don't take a job that are telling you you're going to have a no hours contract and you're going to have to work everything. Don't just take any, like, be sensible about what you're taking. And then similarly, when you're in a position like Chloe did, you know, if you're open and honest with your employer and they're honest with you and they tell you that this role needs someone all the time, then you just need to put yourself first. And, you know, it's scary, but have your baby and then find a family that will support your situation. They are out there.
That's definitely right. Have your family and then find the job that works for you.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not the current job you're in, you know, but don't prioritize the work. Have your family if that's what you want, you know, whether it's one child or 73, and then find the family that's going to work, because there's going to be one. There's going to be a family and a position out there that can work for you. It may take longer to find, but it's not impossible. You may have to create that role, you know, but yeah, definitely put the family first.
And you'll be a better employee for it as well, because you won't have any resentment.
You'll be happy.
You won't have any resentment to the industry or to the sector, to your job, because you've missed out. I'm definitely, well, yeah, you don't know until you have children if it suits you, but yeah, you have your family, and yeah, it sort of completes you, and then you will be in a position to sort of go out and you end up doing something completely different, like Chloe's doing, and she's now doing her own thing and probably loving it. And, you know, would look back in the future and this may never have happened if you didn't fall pregnant, you know, and so you never know how life's going to turn out.
He was definitely
my last.
Yeah. Sorry, Julius.
I was going to say no. My last employer, the principal's wife, actually said that we prefer our staff to be married because they have a stability.
Yeah.
So especially being in the Middle East, that, you know, they weren't going to sort of run around and, you know, things. So you know, you go home to your wife every night and things like that. So
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that is, I feel that what we have come to in the end is you can have your cake and eat it, but you just have to be really careful about choosing which cake you're going to have.
Pick the right cake.
Yeah, pick the right cake.
Well, let's not go there. All cake is good.
So thank you so much for joining me, everyone. I mean, I know we could literally practically continue discussing this all night, but I don't think we're going to come to any different outcomes. But if anyone had any final thoughts they just wanted to share before we sign off, I'm happy for you to. No? Okay. Well, I think we did cover the whole gambit of that. And I'm really hoping that Michelle will be able to take that advice and feel a bit more confident that she can have a career and a family. Because, and to be honest, all of us here, like whether it's directly in private service or different, we have all had a successful career with a family. So it's universally proven that it's possible. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining me. Anyone actually watches this video, thank you very much as well. Very grateful for it, and I'll make sure that we'll be sending out lots more videos in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks very much.